Hello, and I welcome you all to this 18th lecture of the course titled Psychology of Stress, Health and Well-being. So, this is second lecture of module 6 and overall it is 18th lecture. So, the title of today's lecture is Well-being and Resilience. So, let us have a brief recap of the last lecture before we talk about today's lecture. So, in the last lecture, that is lecture 17, we discussed the concept of mental health and well-being. So, we try to give you an overview of the concepts of health, mental health and well-being, the various prominent definitions of these concepts, and we then specifically try to understand the concept of well-being and try to understand the well-being from two different theoretical approaches. One is hedonic concepts of well-being and another is called as eudaimoc concepts of well-being. So, in the hedonic concept basically talks about well-being in terms of pleasure, in terms of emotional experiences, in terms of happiness, in terms of satisfaction. Whereas, and it is in psychology typically called as subjective well-being, whereas eudaimoc well-being, which is also called as psychological well-being, talks about well-being beyond just transitory emotional experiences. It talks about well-being in terms of personal growth, self-actualization, meaning and purpose in life, positive relationships and so on. We have discussed in details about all these things. And then we have also discussed the various historical and biological roots of these two traditions, how historically these two approaches of well-being conceptualization has come into the today's literature, the historical background we discussed, and then we also discussed some possible biological connections to each of these traditions. Then we discussed that well-being should be conceptualized as a kind of combination of both hedonic and eudaimoc well-being. To understand well-being in a holistic way, it is always better to measure or look into well-being in terms of promoting well-being, both hedonic as well as eudaimoc well-being. So, well-being should be a combination of both hedonic and eudaimoc concepts. Then we have discussed at last the keys 13 dimensions of positive mental health. So, we discussed this particular model proposed by researcher named Keyes, who proposed a model where he conceptualized well-being by combining both hedonic as well as eudaimoc concepts of well-being. So, he talked about three main dimensions of well-being, positive or well-being or positive mental health. One is basically emotional well-being, which talks about positive emotions and life satisfactions. Then second factor is psychological well-being, which is basically eudaimoc well-being concepts such as autonomy, meaning and purpose in life, positive relationships, environmental mastery and so on. And the last third factor was social well-being, which is basically described in terms of social integration, social contribution, social coherence and social actualization and so on. So, today we will talk about the concept of resilience and how it is connected to the concept of well-being, and typically we will try to understand how can we build resilience using one particular model called Seligman's model of well-being, which is also called as PERMA model, PERMA. So, we will try to understand all these concepts in today's lecture. So, what is resilience? We have discussed the concept of resilience also in the context of post-traumatic growth when we discussed the concept of post-traumatic growth. So, the sense of resilience is another concept which is closely connected to the concept of well-being. So, generally in the literature of well-being, you will also come into the discussion of resilience very often. So, resilience have been defined in various ways. Some of the definitions are, for example, resilience is a dynamic process encompassing positive adaptation within the context of significant adversity. So, this is one definition which talks about resilience as a dynamic process within us, and it talks about the positive adaptation in an adversity situation or in a life crisis. So, you positively adapt in the context of significant adversity in life. Another definition talks about resilience as characterized by good outcomes in spite of serious threats and adaptation or development. So, even at the face of serious threat, you are able to adapt. So, basically resilience is about your ability to bounce back from a life crisis or an adversity of life. So, we often experience, or many times we experience various adversities and life crises, and many people many time it find it difficult to come out of difficulties of life or crises of life, and some people very quickly come out of it. So, people who are able to very quickly bounce back, their sense of resilience is much more. So, that is the idea of resilience, how quickly you are positively adapt to a situation and come back to your normal functioning level. So, that indicates your sense of resilience. So, there are two defining aspects to resilience. One is exposure to significant threat or adversity. So, resilience is always discussed in the context of exposure to some threat or adversities or some traumatic situation. And the second aspect is, once you are exposed to those adversities of life, how quickly you are able to achieve positive adaptation despite threats, how quickly you are able to adapt to that situation. So, these are two important components in defining the sense of resilience. So, some researchers also talks about or distinguish between resilience as a trait and resilience as a process. So, some people conceptualize resilience as a kind of personality trait. So, when we say something as a personality trait, we are talking about it is a part of your own individual characteristics. So, some people are just highly resilient, some people are simply not resilient. So, it is kind of part of your characteristic personality trait, and some people talk it as a process. It is not just something that you are born with. It depends on various factors, internal and external factors that interact to decide sense of resilience. So, as a trait, it is considered as an individual ability to resist. So, it's more look like your ability, your individual personal ability when we talk something as a trait to resist being damaged by trauma and adversities. As a process, it is considered as an outcome of dynamic process about bouncing back or recovering from the trauma or adversity. It looks at how an individual recovers from the adversity. So, both conceptualization are there, but most of the researcher kind of consider resilience as a, or believes that resilience involves thoughts, actions and behavior that one can learn. So, we are not just born with sense of resilience. Most of us, the sense of resilience is developed as a learning process throughout our life. So, it may depend on various thought processes, our actions, our environmental factors. So, it is more considered as a kind of process. So, it is not just a privilege of some people who are born with some genetic composition for resilient, to become resilient. It can be learned, and it is a more conceptualized in terms of process. So, what is the relationship between the concept of resilience and well-being? So, we have discussed the meaning of well-being in detail in the last lecture. So, are there any relationship between the sense of resilience and well-being? Let us see some of the evidences. So, resilience and well-being are closely related constructs or concepts to the extent that some well-being instrument measure resilience. Sometimes well-being and resilience are so closely connected, and people conceptualize them in such a way that resilience almost becomes an indicator of well-being. So, they are very closely connected concepts, and many research use them as an very correlated concepts. So, the relationship between resilience and well-being is not very straightforward. Even though they are very closely connected, they are not very straightforward. Some research shows the relationship can be very different depending on the situation or different factors. So, many research indicate that higher level of well-being leads to more resilience. So, generally there seems to be a lot of research indicate there is a positive relationship. So, as your well-being increases, your sense of resilience also increases. So, if your sense of well-being is higher, at the face of adversity you are more likely to bounce back and come to your normal level of functionings in life. So, it could be due to the fact that positive individuals or people with higher well-being are more resilient because they approach situations expecting better outcomes and tend to elicit more positive response. So, sense of well-being basically makes you more resourceful and give you certain outlook towards life that you are able to deal with them and come out of the situation or difficulties much more easily. So, that could be one reason why there is a positive relationship. One important component of well-being or hedonic well-being is positive emotions, and research indicates that positive emotions actually facilitate sense of resilience, because when we experience negative emotions, then we are generally we are not able to deal effectively with a situation. We become narrow focused, and maybe mostly we get into destructive mode of behavior. So, positive emotions, if you have a higher sense of well-being or particularly hedonic well-being, so your sense of your positive emotion will be much higher. That will facilitate resilience, because then you will kind of able to think properly and deal with the environment, and will have much more resources to deal with the situation. It is also possible that resilience to predict a number of well-being outcomes, such as subjective well-being. So, a lot of research also indicate that resilience can predict well-being and various indicators of well-being, such as subjective well-being. So, a lot of research indicates there is a positive connection between them. However, some research also indicate that it is that some incidents of antecedents of well-being and resilience diminish attainment of others. So, it is possible in certain contexts that some aspect of well-being or antecedents or factors that influences well-being may actually hinder the sense of resilience. For example, a few studies reported that the positive emotions associated with well-being, such as joy and calmness, sometimes tend to generate a diffuse contentment rather than the sharp, vivid focus on challenges associated with resilience. So, sometimes to become resilient, you need to be very sharp, focus, and those kind of mode where you are able to really become very functioning oriented, or where you need to come out and do some sharp functionings at that particular moment. So, sometimes positive emotion may diffuse some of these aspects, sharpness in the mind, so which can kind of hinder your sense of resilience. So, some research at least indicates that it could be possible in certain contexts. But in most research actually shows that there is a positive relationship, and sense of well-being and positive emotions can actually lead to or facilitate one another. So, therefore, the relationship between well-being and resilience, they are always very closely connected, but sometimes the relation may not be very straight, but most of the research indicate a positive relationship between them. So, in this context, we will discuss Martin Seligman's model of well-being, which is also called as PERMA, P-E-R-M-A. So, we will try to see what is that. Now, we will discuss this model particularly in the context of well-being and resilience, simply because these two concepts are very closely, this model is addresses directly both well-being and resilience. The component of this model are basically, PERMA basically means each is it is a kind of acronym for 5 component. So, P is for positive emotions, E is for engagement, R is for relationship, M is for meaning, and A is for achievement or accomplishment. So, that is the meaning of PERMA, PERMA model. So, basically it talks about 5 dimensions of well-being, and research generally shows these components, as well-being and resilience are very closely connected. These components are also very important in terms of facilitating resilience also. So, that is why I will discuss this model, because it is the components are strongly connected to both well-being, because it is a model of well-being. So, components are directly connected to the sense of well-being, but these models are also components are very strongly connected to sense of or increasing our sense of resilience also. So, let us see what are each of these component, and we will see how can we build each of these component. So, we will try to summarize some of the important aspects. So, Professor Seligman's research has proven that an increase in PERMA or all these components will result in an increase in resilience and boost mental health and well-being. So, all these components are important for boosting your well-being and mental health as well as your sense of resilience. So, most of these components we will discuss each of these component in much more detailed in some of the upcoming lectures individually, but here we will try to briefly summarize each of them and we will try to see how can we build or increase this component, each of these component. So, that will be our focus in today's lecture. So, let us start with positive emotion. So, first component of PERMA model is P, which is basically means positive emotions. So, we will have separate lecture on that also, but here we will just briefly comment on important aspects. So, positive emotions basically are pleasant emotions, which may include emotions such as amusement, hope, interest, joy, love, compassion, gratitude and so on. So, all these emotions whenever we experience, so we have a sense of pleasantness and sweetness within us when we experience such kind of emotions. So, in that sense they are called as positive emotions. Research shows that positive emotions broadens our thoughts and actions. So, whenever we experience positive emotions, we kind of get expanded. So, our focus become more expanded and more inclusive in the sense that our thoughts become more expanded and we are able to focus on much more important aspects, much more diverse aspects. Our behavioral repertoire also increases. So, positive emotions kind of broadens our thoughts and actions, whereas negative emotion actually narrows down our thoughts and actions. So, when we are very negatively focused, such as you are very sad or anger, then we become very narrow focused and we are only focusing on the problems at hand. So, we are kind of get stuck in something and we are not able to think beyond that. So, that is the meaning of narrowing down, where positive emotion does the opposite to that. And so because of that broadening, it helps to build various kinds of resources within us to deal with a problem of life or to increase our sense of well-being. So, it may build our psychological resources, because when your thoughts are broadened, you become more creative, you can see much more solutions to a problem, and it may build social resources in the sense that if we under positive emotions we are better able to connect with people. People also find much more joy in our company. So, in that sense it also increases our social resources. So, and it can also build our physical resources in terms of when you are playful, joyful, it increases our physical resources also. So, positive emotions does these functions. It broadens our thought sections as well as builds various resources, and which in turn actually increases our sense of well-being as well as it promotes sense of resilience. So, positive emotion enhances well-being and performance related outcomes, and it reduces our negative emotions. So, obviously, when you experience positive emotion, you cannot experience negative emotion, in the sense it will kind of undo negative emotions. So, how to build positive emotion or increase positive emotions, so that it increases our well-being as well as our sense of resilience, because it is connected to both. So, there are some of the suggestions given by various researchers. So, I took some of these suggestions from Well-being and Resilience Center website. So, some of the ideas related to building positive emotion are practicing gratitude. So, we will look into gratitude also in much more detail in the coming lecture. Practicing gratitude basically means you intentionally look back or look into positive aspects of your life or things for which you are thankful in your life. So, that is the meaning of practicing gratitude. Most of the time our focus remains in the problem areas, or focus remains in the negative aspects of our life. So, you may have 10 positive things in your life, but one negative thing, your whole focus goes there and you start complaining about things. Simply because negative things and negative emotions catches our attention much more. So, when we go into this complaining mode, we experience negative emotions, but when we intentionally try to look at the positive aspects of your life or things for which I should be grateful, or you express gratefulness and thankfulness towards that for whatever things, or to the people who have contributed to your life, it increases our sense of positive emotions. You feel good about it, you so many positive emotions are experienced by sense of expressing sense of thankfulness and gratitude. So, this is one of the important ways by which you can build or increase positive emotions. Second thing is doing activities that you enjoy. So, this is also very important. Mostly, so try to do more activities which you enjoy. It could be a hobby, it could be anything that you enjoy, or at least try to find times for doing those kind of activities. So, doing something that you like and enjoy will enhance your positive emotions. Then obviously spending time with loved one, this is one of the best ways. So, we feel immediate rush of positive emotions when we connect and talk and with people whom we love. So, try to connect more and more with people whom you love, or your friends, whoever, family members. This will enhance your positive emotions. Then playing with children, pets and friends, these are also basically connecting with things that you love. So, if you try to find this kind of leisurely time to play with children, pets and friends, so this will also enhance your positive emotions. And another strategy is doing exercises, particularly aerobic exercises. We have already talked about it in the coping strategies section, or in the lecture where I talked about physical ways of coping. There we have discussed that aerobic exercise, or particularly physical exercise and particularly aerobic exercise can release some hormones such as endorphins, which enhances your mood, or it promotes positive mood. So, you can experience positive emotions by doing exercise also. Then obviously last is obviously listening to uplifting music that you like. The music is one of the very simple and effective ways of immediately stimulating positive emotions. Whatever music that you like, the moment you hear about music, it immediately stimulates positive emotions. So, it is also one of the very effective and easiest way of kind of stimulating positive emotions. Another concept called optimism is very strongly connected to positive emotions, because optimism is about becoming looking at the brighter side of any future event, and it is very strongly connected to sense of resilience. People who are very resilient, they are very optimistic, and positive emotion actually facilitate that optimism. Under negative emotions, we always become pessimistic. We see always the darker part of life or darker aspects of future. Under positive emotion, we are, because of broadening our thoughts, and we are able to look at positive aspects also. So, in that sense, it promotes optimism, and optimism is very strongly related to sense of resilience. The next component of PERMA model is E, that is called as engagement. So, engagement in life is basically about one of the concept in psychology, which is called as flow experiences, FLOW, flow. So, it is about finding flow experience, which basically means what? Flow experiences happens, most of you might have experienced flow experiences sometimes in your life. It happens in the moment where you get intensely focused in a particular task at your hand. You get so intensely focused and engrossed in that particular task, and in the present moment that you forget the track of time, how much time has passed, and you forget other things in your environment. So, you get so much engrossed in that task that you forget other aspects, including time. So, then you are in the flow experience in that particular moment. So, we all might have experienced such moments in our life when we are engaged in some tasks which are very important, and we enjoyed them so much that we forget about other aspects of our environment, and we forget the keep track of time. So, flow experiences are very important in our life, and the more we experience flow, better it is for our sense of well-being and resilience. So, flow experience was primarily kind of proposed by one psychologist. His name is Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. It's very difficult to pronounce. I hope I am correct. He is a leading researcher in that area. He found that flow happens when we perform a challenging task, where we have the opportunity to use your skills and strength. So, generally it happens, flow experiences happens when we engaged in a task which is challenging. So, it is not that very easy, it is not like very difficult and impossible task, it is a challenging task. It kind of gives you an opportunity to strengthen or kind of stretch your skills and abilities. So, that is very important. So, flow will never happen to a task which is very easy for you, flow will never happen to a task which is very difficult for you, that you are not able to do it, because in either case you will not be really engaged. Engagement happens when it is very challenging, that you have the skills and abilities, but it will not be very easy, you need to extend and expand it. So, in those tasks generally flow happens. So, flow and engagement improve subjective well-being, happiness, life satisfaction and positive effect. This is the research finding. So, this is very important to find out activities that leads you to flow experience. It is also found to be correlated with increased performance, higher motivation and engagement and positive mood in organizational context. So, it has a lot of benefits in terms of performance and efficiencies. So, how to build engagement or increase flow experiences? So, one thing is obviously you need to identify and do activities that leads to flow and engagement. So, you can identify the things that or activities that help that whenever you do those activities, it tends to kind of stimulate flow experience. So, we all may find flow experience in different activities. So, you need to find your own activities which can lead to flow experience, find them and do those activities more and more, at least so that will enhance your sense of flow experience or engagement in life, or specifically. So, you will get much more focused in your different aspect of your activities that you do in your life. The next thing is identify and use your signature strengths. So, it is very important, use your strengths. So, many people have different strengths, many times people do not use those strengths, or they do not, maybe sometimes they do not get opportunities to use those strengths. So, it is very important that you need to use your signature strengths. So, your strength could be in anything, it could be your communication skill, it could be your social skills, whatever it is, whatever strength you have, use them more and more in different tasks and situations of your life, that will help you to enhance flow experiences. And another suggestion is learn and practice mindfulness meditation technique. This is also very important. We have already discussed in one full lecture on mindfulness and meditation. Such a practice of mindfulness helps you to focus and come to the present moment and engage with the task. So, by practicing mindfulness, you will be able to experience flow more and more into more and more diverse activities. So, because it will train your mind to focus on the present moment and engage with the task. So, practicing mindfulness will promote flow experiences, and you will be able to engage with much more diverse activities than in general what you maybe engage in flow experiences only in some particular task. So, the next is relationships. The relationships we have also talked in details in the lecture where we discuss coping with social support, and we have discussed that we are all social animals and there is an inbuilt motivation and need within us to belong to a community or a family or to connect with people. So, it is a very inbuilt motivation and need within all of us, and so we are social animal. So, that is something which constantly helps us or motivates us to seek relationships and find happiness from the relationship. So, this is very important for sense of enhancing our well-being, positive relationship with people, and it is also very important that the relationships are very important for increasing our sense of resilience, because in the time of adversity, it is the relation or people who are supporting people or network of people around us which plays very important role in terms of bouncing back. So, if you have a good supportive network, you can very easily bounce back from a difficult situation, because you will have more added resources to you. Whatever resources you have to deal with a situation, it will be added to other resources of other individuals in your network. So, you will be very easily and come out from that situation. So, it is very important for sense of resilience also that you have a good support network. So, we have discussed about diverse aspect to it also in the earlier also. So, social support is particularly important personal resource, because it helps to provide access to further resources beyond those already possessed by just individuals. So, that is the key thing, that is why it is very important for both well-being as well as resilience. So, therefore, our relationships and social supports are one of the most significant source of well-being and resilience. So, building relationship, this part also we have discussed, and so the basic idea in building relationship is basically two aspects. One is to identify and improve the problems in the existing social network. So, existing also there may be we may be connected to so many people, but our relationship is not that good with many people, primarily because of our small issues and egoistic issues, because of which there may be some problem in the existing social relationships. So, it is important to identify them and remove those deficiencies as much as possible. So, it will enhance our relationship quality. And the second aspect is, obviously, you can always build new connections or new relationships, which can be done in many ways. We have already discussed many aspects to it. Primarily, it can be done by let us say participating in groups, whatever groups people with like-minded people can connect to various professional groups or hobby related groups, and so many groups nowadays. Physical groups are there, sometimes online groups are there, where you can connect with many people who are similar to your thinking pattern, and you can connect with people. So, you can participate in the groups and communities that you like, where you can find like-minded people. You can also engage in various altruistic and volunteering activities, where you can find out people who are similar to you. So, there are many ways by which you can build new relationships and connections, and another way is obviously improving the existing deficiencies in the social support network. So, these are some of the important ways by which you can build more better social relationship and positive relationships. The next is meaning in life, the next component of PERMA model, which is important for both well-being as well as resilience. So, meaning in life is about, it's a very subjective thing, everybody has different concepts of meaning in life, and it is about doing things that are valuable, that are worthwhile. So, if you think you are doing something engaged, or you are engaged in things that are valuable, that are worthwhile, then your sense of meaning will be much higher in your life, as compared to when you say I am engaged in worthless activities. That may not give you a sense of meaning and purpose in your life. So, basically this involves belonging to or serving something that we believe is greater than ourselves. So, another aspects to meaning in life is basically whenever we engaged in or serve something which is beyond just my own personal self-interest or personal life. If you become a part of something bigger, then also it enhances your sense of meaning. So, the search for meaning is another very fundamental motivation within all of us. We all want to make our life meaningful and purposeful, because without sense of meaning and purpose, we will not be able to, we will not get any motivation to lead our life. So, maybe a lot of depressed people, maybe they do not find meaning in their life. So, one of the reason could be lack of meaning may lead to depression. Then you do not find why should I even do anything in your life. So, the sense of motivation, active engagement in life is strongly connected to your sense of meaning. The more meaning you will have in a particular context or life in general, you will be more actively involved in those things. So, it is a very important intrinsic motivation within all of us, and we will talk more also about this aspect in one whole lecture on meaning in life in the upcoming lecture. So, an individual achieves meaning in life when his or her life is experienced as purposeful, significant and understandable. So, when you have, that is some of the indicators of meaning in life. When you perceive your life as purposeful, it is significant, and it is understandable. So, there is a sense and logic in your life or whatever activities that you do. This sense of purpose provides individual with goals that guide action and promote well-being. So, it always helps you to guide action, no, and promotes sense of well-being. Finding meaning in one life is very important determinant for psychological well-being. So, for psychological well-being also it is very important, and for resilience also. So, in this context, philosopher Nietzsche once said one statement that he who has a why to live can bear with almost any how. So, basically what he is saying. So, I will just so that is very important in the context of meaning in life is that he said so, this is the statement given by Nietzsche, where he said, he who has a why to live can bear with almost any how. What is the meaning of this? Is basically, if you have a answer to why should I live, if you have an answer to this question. So, that is the meaning, that is the concept of meaning in life, means you have a reason to live, why should I live. So, that is why question answer gives you meaning in your life. So, if you have a meaning in your life or why to live, that answer you have very clear, then you can bear with almost anyhow. In any situation, any problem, any difficulties that comes, you can bear with them and come out, because you have a sense of purpose and meaning. So, whatever problems and difficulties come, you can bear with them and kind of fight back, and simply because of this sense of meaning will give you strength and motivation to come out of it. So, that is why it is very importantly connected to the sense of resilience also. So, sense of meaning is very important, and it is a very deeper sense which may help you to cope with the difficulties of life in a very subtle way without really realizing or consciously doing about with a particular situation. So, building meaning is very subjective. About building meaning in your life is a subjective thing, and everybody find meaning in different things. So, there cannot be given a generalized statement about it. So, people may find meaning in different things. People may find meaning in the professions or the job that they are doing. They may find it very meaningful, and it may give you a sense of purpose in their life. Some people find meaning in the creative pursuits that they do in their life. Some people find meaning in their hobbies, that whatever hobbies that they are doing. Some people find meaning in volunteering for a cause greater than themselves, for social welfare or community welfare. People do so many things, so they find meaning in those things. So find your own meaning, and maybe try to devote more time in those kind of activities. So, that is the thing, because it is very subjective. There cannot be one meaning for everybody. It is a kind of cultural contrast, kind of concept that we develop. Very subjectively it can be developed. So, the idea of meaning has to be explored by yourself only, and you need to find it out, and you need to work towards that. So, basically the idea is get involved in causes greater than your own personal life. That also enhances your sense of meaning. So, in small way or bigger ways, you can contribute to things that are just beyond your own self interest. So, it could be doing something for the community, doing for something from the society, or even in your job context, doing something for the organization beyond just your own personal role can also enhance sense of meaning. So, whenever you find yourself as a part of something bigger, it will naturally enhance your sense of meaning. The last component is accomplishment or achievement. So, basically this is also an important concepts that gives us sense of or increases sense of our well-being. So, it is about things that we have done or accomplished in our life. So, whenever we think about our life, so there may be many things that we have accomplished. It could be small thing, it could be sometimes big things. So, all these things gives us a sense of accomplishment, what I have achieved in my life. So, it is mostly connected with working and identifying and working towards and reaching towards different goals in our life, short term goal, long term goal, whatever it is. All these identifying goals and reaching towards them is connected to our sense of accomplishment or achievement. So, when we talk about accomplishment or achievement, we are not talking about accomplishing something very big. It can be small things. For example, people may enhance their sense of accomplishment. Even for example, you may target a goal such as doing half an hour exercise every day, and achieving that can enhance your sense of accomplishment. So, it is something very individual, but small thing, but you set a target and try to achieve that. So, that can also enhance your sense of achievement. It is not necessarily all the time some big goals that needs to be achieved. So, such thing also can sense of accomplishment, happiness and well-being. So, it increases our sense of self esteem and confidence. So, with the sense of accomplishment, it enhances our self esteem. So, we feel good about ourselves. So, that is the meaning of self esteem and our sense of confidence. There is an important concept that is connected to accomplishment, is called as grit. Grit is also associated with goal setting and accomplishment. It was proposed by a psychologist named Angela Duckworth. She particularly used this term to connote the idea of perseverance and passion for long term goals. Perseverance and passion for long term goals. So, grit is a quality of people who persevere, consistently work towards long term goals. Short term goals, obviously you can very easily achieve them, but long term goal, achievement of long term goals needs lot of persistence, lot of efforts, and you need to face lot of failures again and again. So, that quality to engage and persevere in the long term goals is called as grit. So, some people may have lot of higher grit, and that can really make lot of difference in terms of achievement in your life, your sense of achievement. So, people with grit are more likely to achieve various difficult goals in their life. So, people who exhibit grit persevere at their goals over time, even at the face of failures and adversity. So, that is very important. Generally, people may not get the enough strength and motivation to work towards a goal when they experience failure in that task. So, despite failure, if you are able to work towards a goal again and again, so that perseverance is very important, and that quality is called as grit. So, it is especially important to achieve, this quality is especially important to achieve high and difficult goals where sustained application of talent over time is required. So, certain goals achievement requires this quality, and people who succeed in lot of tasks may have this quality, especially achieve long term and difficult goals in their life. So, how can we build sense of accomplishment? So, building sense of accomplishment is basically connected to setting achievable and realistic goals. So, if you achieve a goal which is not realistic for you, then you will experience failure again and again, and you may not have motivation to work towards that after some time. So, it is important that you set goals which are achievable and realistic for your context, then your chances of achieving them will be much higher. Goals always need not be very big and high all the time. Setting achievable small goals on a daily basis can increase our sense of accomplishment. So, goals always can be broken, even long term goal can be broken in terms of short term goals. So, you need to achieve something within a year, you can break that goal into more short term specific goals maybe say what you need to achieve in this particular week, what you need to achieve in this month. So, in that way we can always work towards a long term goal, more achievable goals. So, even small goals can also give you a sense of achievement. So, set your goals by assessing your own strengths, talents and skills and persevere in it. So, many times we experience failure, but if it is important achievable goal, you need to focus and persevere in that. That is very important. And after a few times of failure, if you achieve it, your sense of achievement will be much higher rather than achieving something which is much more easier. So, that is also another important dimension. Also, you can celebrate your achievements with yourself and others. So, whenever you achieve something, if you celebrate it with your near and dear ones, that also gives or enhances your sense of achievement. If other people also recognizes it, understands it. Research also shows that achieving intrinsic goals, which are related to growth and connection rather than money and status, produces larger gains in well-being. So, intrinsic goal means goals that you set by yourself, which you like to achieve them, as compared to extrinsic goals, which are kind of given to them by some outside agencies or people. So, achieving intrinsic goal is always gives you more sense of well-being, simply because it is your own thing that you like rather than something forced on you. So, these are some of the ways by which we can build sense of accomplishment. So, building resilience. So, we have discussed this PERMA model of Seligman, and we try to understand that all these 5 components of PERMA model are very important components for our well-being, and they include both the hedonic dimension as well as eudaimoc dimensions. And so, this is a model of well-being. So, these components are directly connected to our sense of well-being, but it is also important that these dimensions also are very important for enhancing our sense of resilience also. So, that is why in that context we try to understand briefly about these components and how to enhance this component in our life, so that we can build our sense of well-being and resilience. So, in the last thought of building resilience is about so we can understand how these components are important to resilience by reading this statement that American Psychological Association website also discusses that there are 4 key components for enhancing resilience, and these components are build connections, foster wellness, embrace healthy thinking and find purpose and meaning. So, you can very clearly see these are all connected to PERMA model, and we have already discussed all these components in that context. So, these are important for enhancing or building our sense of resilience. So, the crux is that any strategy that leads to healthy coping and foster sense of well-being can increase our sense of resilience also. So, anything that we do to enhance our or healthy ways of coping or dealing with the situation, because resilience is all about also dealing with the situation, and if our sense of well-being is much higher or anything that we do to increase our well-being, also it kinds of gives an additional resources to come out of a situation and bounce back from a difficult situation. So, healthy coping strategies and enhancing our sense of well-being are the key things to enhance our sense of resilience. So, with this I will stop today's lecture. Thank you.